Welcome to Real Health and Nutrition, where real health meets real performance. My name is Max Dennehy.
My name is Matthew Rigoni.
We're your dietitian duo ready to tackle on the world of health, nutrition, performance, and excitement. Matthew, take us through what we're going through today.
Absolutely, Max. So today we're talking about the acronyms of R.E.A.L going through. We've already had a chat about recovery, already had a chat about exercise. We're going through still with exercise, but more on activity and the differences between exercise and activity. Is it important? Do we need to think about it? Does it matter? And why do we think it matters? More particularly me, because it's more my passion of area. But we'll have a discussion today, come to a consensus, and then you, the viewer or listener, can take away the best bits of our conversation for your own nice little life. Max,
Yeah,
what
no,
are you
exactly.
wearing?
I got this given this guy come up to me in the street and he's like, "Hey man, this is my treasure. It's my favorite T-shirt I've ever had in my life. I'm gonna give this to you as a friend," and I accepted it.
Was this the bloke who assaulted you in Frankston?
Well
For a
said.
little
Well
bit of
said.
context, we were having a business meeting and Max just randomly hangs up the call after swearing. And later he tells me an experience where he was,
Yeah.
let's say, had a conversation with an individual who was under the influence of something.
Yeah. That was funny. But yeah. Anyway, so look, no, I'm wearing the merch. Matthew, I think we can say, look, I didn't even talk about this with you beforehand, but I think we can comfortably say this won't be the merch we'll be giving out to people that actually buy it. This is definitely trial number one. We're not in love with how this looks. Obviously, we're in love with this logo. Who couldn't be? But we're not in love with how the whole T-shirt fits and looks and everything. But the reality is we are in the process of doing all that. So this is prototype number one, and I don't think there will not be a day that passes where I won't be wearing this. So I'm really excited. We actually have a lot better T-shirt, a black T-shirt, but you'll probably see that on Instagram and all that throughout the course of
Yeah, absolutely.
throughout the course of
Trial and error.
posts, especially by the time this has come out, you would have seen several posts by then with both of us wearing the merch. But I think what is really interesting, Matthew, is because we're distinguishing exercise and activity. And look, it's hearsay. They're both, similar kinds of things. But the cool thing is that we actually are kind of right in the sense that we literally have non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and then we have exercise activity thermogenesis. So we literally are being quite correct with our definitions of exercise versus activity. I didn't even realize that. Did you realize that?
No, that's a nice little coincidence there, but I think that ties us into a really great topic of discussion. What is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT for short? What is NEAT? How do we discuss that, Max?
This is the easiest definition ever. I've explained this so many times to people. So I feel like when you've explained things a lot of times to people, you get quite efficient at conversing it to someone. Really, it's essentially just every single piece of exercise that you're doing or every single movement you're doing that isn't exercise. So going to the gym is exercising, going for a run is exercising. Anything that isn't considering exercise is NEAT. So anytime I'm moving my hands, anytime I'm going to sneeze, anytime I'm pulling up my shorts or putting on my socks or tying my shoelaces or putting my belt on, anything, brushing my teeth, anything you're doing, cooking dinner, cleaning, is all non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And obviously it's not going to be I've made it out to be kind of binary. It is spectrum based in the sense that, cleaning, like sweeping the floors or, doing a lot of cleaning, some people would actually consider that to be, they're active and they're doing things. So, but I think from the point of conversation from this standpoint is that we're just talking about, your typical exercising.
So the difference between exercise and activity, I think, is a really good point of discussion. NEAT specifically is something that's subconscious. You're not actively doing it, and that's activity based. So it's no effort put into it to the point of you're exerting yourself to let's say, super high levels.
Well, I don't know. We haven't had a debate in a long time, which has been interesting, really. I would push to say, because that is the definition. What you said is what I've heard other people talk about with the definition of NEAT. But my first thoughts are subconscious maybe shouldn't be included in the definition there, just on the basis that if you're cleaning or cooking something, you're not doing it subconsciously. You're very conscious about, this is the task I'm doing. I would just classify it as any task that isn't exercise.
Ooh.
I think
You've
like
really opened a bit of a can of worms for me there. I would tend to disagree.
okay.
Yeah, just because if I'm going out of my way to say something is exercise, it has to intentionally be very difficult to the point where we're pushing ourselves to an extenuating circumstance. I
Mhm.
don't even know if I used the correct word in
Extenuating,
that
yeah.
term there, but very much of a position where we need to be pushing ourselves outside of what we're continually used to and comfortable with. And unless we're doing that, I wouldn't really say it's exercising. I think it's more
No,
so
no,
a
I'm not
level
saying
of
it's
activity.
no. I'll clarify what I said. I think the definition of NEAT shouldn't only include subconscious things. It should include conscious things as well, being cooking, cleaning, putting on your clothes, brushing your teeth, because all those things are you're consciously doing those things.
I guess it would depend on the level of strenuousness of the actual activity itself. For myself, putting on pants, that's an absolute struggle in the morning. Like I can barely do it. But for someone else who's more functional as a person, putting on their pants is just a normal daily task. But
Yeah, yeah,
for myself, it's almost like an exercise for me because it's just so difficult to roll out of
yeah.
bed.
Look, we're really getting into semantics here. I think for me, when I think of if I was to define NEAT, because and correct me if I'm wrong, but when I heard your definition of NEAT, you said subconscious activities that don't involve exercise, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why I like that is because the subconscious element is the element that is going to be the variability, right? So I'm just diverting a little bit here on the basis that NEAT fluctuates a lot, and we're going to get into this over the course of the podcast when NEAT will fluctuate, according to what conditions NEAT will fluctuate in and why. And that's all subconscious, right? You can't control the amount that NEAT fluctuates really to some extent because your body just does it naturally for you. And so I really like that explaining that it's subconscious, but I don't think you can define NEAT as being subconscious just because a lot of the things that are in, like you would agree that cooking would go under the NEAT category, right?
Uh, Not entirely sure. I
What
think you've
category?
probably like opened my brain a little bit here and scrambled everything around. So in terms of exercise, definitely not an exercise
Definitely not.
thing
Yeah,
for most people, anyways. But
unless you're a
it's
master chef.
definitely an yeah, exactly. Gordon Ramsay put up an absolute storm in the kitchen. Unless you're an absolute um, how would I even put this? It's definitely not subconscious because you're actively doing something. It's an activity, but I wouldn't say you're pushing yourselves from a physical exertion perspective unless you're doing it for multiple hours at a time. It's like an endurance activity, but then it's more so like a toll on your joints rather than
Oh no, it's
muscles.
not. But because the whole thing about NEAT is that lots of it isn't you're pushing yourself either, is right? All right, like it's just you're moving your hands around, you're doing things like no one's. Yeah,
That was my general assumption of NEAT is that it's kind of just things that you're not aware of that you're doing throughout the day. So like I might be moving my eyes more, I might be moving the muscles in my face more for certain expressions. My hands are moving more. If I'm cooking in the kitchen, I might be stepping around a little bit more. But the act of cooking itself is not NEAT because that's an active and conscious thought process and event
so what category would you put it under then?
activity. And that's why it's so important to differentiate between
But
exercise,
isn't that the
activity,
whole?
and NEAT.
Isn't that what the definition of NEAT is? Non-exercise activity.
And I have to get it up now because
See, my
I
understanding,
think
as Matt's getting it up, my understanding was that basically you've got when we're looking at our total daily energy expenditure, so that's TDEE for short. When we're looking at that total daily energy expenditure, we've got I think four main categories being the NEAT, which is the thing we just explained, so non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And I saw that as every single movement that you did in the day that wasn't exercise. You've got exercise activity thermogenesis, which is every movement you do that is exercise. You've got your BMR, which is the amount of energy it takes for your body to keep the lights on, to, for your heart to keep beating, your brain to keep working, your lungs to keep functioning. Last thing being the thermic effect of food. So your body's the energy it requires for your body to break down and essentially utilize the food that we're consuming. They're the four things that I was under the impression that existed. And so basically everything you do in life has to fit into one of these four categories.
James A. Levine don't know this bloke personally, but he's written a little article and it says non-exercise activity thermogenesis, in brackets NEAT, is the energy expended for everything we do that is not sleeping, eating, or sports like exercise. So I guess that falls under where you're coming from there, and potentially maybe a misunderstanding or kind of an adaptation of what people's thought process towards NEAT is. But I would say generally it tends to be the more uh, unintentional activities.
Guys, quick ad break. We are currently taking on clients. Click the first link in the description to explore more. Back to it. I think the reason why, and you've put up a really good point there, because I personally knew this myself, but I haven't heard anyone explain it before. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation, because the reason why it's so harped on regarding subconscious stuff is because that's the variable stuff. Just like what you were saying before, it doesn't matter whether you're tired or not. Like, one of the things that's going to impact the amount of NEAT you do is your fatigue overall, right? If you're very tired, you're less likely to be moving around. You're going to be more slumpy and sleepy and poopy. Whereas if you're energetic, you're going to be moving around, blah, 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 and you're going to be burning a lot more energy just by proxy of being more energetic. But the things that don't change are the things you have to do every day, just like what Matt's saying. So doesn't matter whether you're tired or not, you still brush your teeth. Doesn't matter whether you're tired enough, you still got to do the laundry, you still got to cook, you still got to clean. So you still got to do all those things. The difference is the subconscious stuff. That's the difference. So they're still included in it, like technically from a definition standpoint, but what Matt's getting at is that the amount of energy you'll be burning is going to depend on what's happening from you on a subconscious level. Is that fair enough, Matt?
Yeah, I think you phrased it pretty well. That's a good little common ground that we can agree on there. So, in terms of like examples that this bloke is putting up, ranges from the energy expended walking to work, typing, performing yard work, undertaking agricultural tasks, and fidgeting. So, a wide variety of things. None of them I would specifically class as exercise in itself. They're definitely like class into terms of physical activity. You're doing things, you're expending energy, you're contracting the muscles, you're sending those neural signals along. Whether it's exercise, not entirely sure. And that's kind of why we wanted to, or myself personally, wanted to break exercise up into two different categories. You've got exercise you're actively doing, pushing yourself quite hard, and activity. Max, what is your thought on kind of breaking those into two separate things? Does that matter to your kind of view, or is it more so just me in my own head?
No, it definitely does matter to me. I heard a really good, this was ages ago, and I don't listen to 3D MJ much, 3D Muscle Journey with R.E.A.L, and there's a few other guys, Alberto Nunez, other people as well that are on part of that team. I don't listen to much, but I have listened to them throughout the course of the last decade or so. And one of the things I really like, it's funny because I don't listen to them much, but I also, pretty much everything I hear from them, I tend to like. But I'm just not drawn to pick them up, if that makes sense. I'm not drawn to
the annoying parents are always right.
It's like it's like anyway. So there's no point harping on that. One of the things I heard from them was that one of the things I really dislike about smartwatches and fitness trackers and all that is that it can potentially, if you are that way inclined personality wise, means you're never turning off. You're never relaxing. You're never chilling out because you're always checking. You're always checking. Oh, how many steps have I done? Oh, fuck, I've still got 4,000 steps to go. Rather than if you have designated exercise times and non-exercise times, you can switch off. You go lie on the couch. I can just chill out. I can relax now. Rather than you're always checking your watch. There's always something. There's always the new thing that's going on that you're trying to do. And if you're writing a recipe on how to burn out, that's what you're going to do, right? Like, never switch off, and you'll be gone in months. In a matter of months or weeks, depending on how much you can stand. And so does that answer your question, Matt, on what I think about it? In that I really think no one should put any emphasis on NEAT because it's a dangerous, dangerous path, and drawing the line is difficult.
Just potentially a variable to be aware of that we aren't in control of. It's like, oh, scary, something we can't control.
Yeah, I think just acknowledgement. Acknowledge that you aren't aware of it. Exactly. And just accept it rather than try and fight it. I think trying to fight it is really, really scary. Because if you have to think the whole day, if you have to remind yourself every few minutes, oh, let's make sure I'm going hyper so I can burn an extra 500 calories or 1,000 calories today. The mental burden that has is crazy.
Yeah, I would argue that the benefits you've received from health, from increasing your total energy expenditure throughout the day, is probably going to be outweighed by the stress and mental fatigue that you're putting on yourself. I know
100%.
personally that's where I will be placing my priorities. It's more so about managing that evenly. I wouldn't necessarily stress at all about NEAT. It's kind of just a thing that happens, but it's just maybe something to be aware about in your kind of journey through. If you're noticing, let's say your weight loss goals and you're progressing towards, things start to plateau around. There's a lot of different reasons why your weight loss can plateau. If you're using specifically weight on scales as a measurement, like kilograms, NEAT may be one of the factors.
Probably the most likely, to be fair,
Potentially,
in my
absolutely,
opinion. Yeah.
absolutely. But it doesn't mean that you can go around and kind of attempt to increase your NEAT, because again, I would say attempting to increase your NEAT is now turned into exercise instead of NEAT. Kind of is a
Yeah.
completely separate variable. Speaking of the exercise and activity, I wanted to discuss a couple of different items going through what is exercise versus what is activity. So I'd say exercise, anything that you're pushing yourself or exerting yourself beyond what you're normally doing on a daily basis, something that's not, let's say, normal. If I'm going to the gym, I'm not going to sit there and type away and work on a computer. It's like I'm going there to exercise, to push myself. We kind of all colloquially know what exercise is.
Yeah.
Max, do you have a better definition or thought around that?
I like the idea, if it's a cardiovascular exercise, I like the idea of the zone training or whatever the fuck it's called. I don't know. Heart
Yeah.
rate zone shit. Just 'cause that's pretty objective, kind of. And then it means you actually are able to determine whether the speed you're going at for your cardio is falling into what range. I really like that personally. And then from a muscle, muscle, from a resistance training point of view, it's again pretty objective. Are you training relatively close to failure or not? And if you're not ticking either of those boxes, if you're not ticking the heart rate box or the training close to failure box, I can't think of too many instances where I would say you can not check not check either of those boxes and you'd still be exercising. Can you think of something? I'm missing something.
Yeah, there's potentially one, but I think it's
Like, there's probably a bunch
I
of
think it's
sports
more
to
of
be fair. Like,
a
is
scale
bowling
situation.
exercising?
I guess it would
Nah.
depend. So I would like to reference this to walking. Walking myself, if I'm walking down the street, casual, leisurely place, got nothing going on in my brain, it's just butterflies up there. Absolutely nothing going on. I'm taking a stroll. I'm not exercising in any means. I'm kind of having a little bit of an activity. I'm doing something, but I'm not exercising. But if I pick up the pace and I'm going full hips swinging left to right like a Olympian power walker, that is absolutely exercising because my heart's pumping. I'm breaking a sweat. I'm breathing heavier than normal. It's getting to the point where it would be classed as a level of exertion that I'd be quite satisfied in saying that is exercise. And I think that specifically is quite important in determining where you're at, because you may be able to do one activity. For myself, I may start on Monday walking 50 meters. I'm cooked, absolutely done. But eventually it'll be, okay, 50 meters is pretty easy. I'm just walking to and from the car. It's not a problem at all. That's now turned into activity. In the same sense of more resistance type training, I started out bench pressing, I think, 6 kilos. That was extremely difficult for me. Now 6 kilos feels like I'm throwing up just total feathers in the air. Like it's not even an activity for me at this point. Just to explain how strong I am as a human being, I'm basically the Hulk in just normal white skin. But on that discussion, it's important to ensure that we're reaching into, if exercise is our goal, we need to up the intensity to reach that specific goal. And I think the same would apply for resistance training up until the point of if we're looking to get in the R.E.A.L kind of 3-ish range,
Less, yeah.
then we need to ensure that we're constantly going for that versus potentially getting used to pushing heavy, but thinking that the weight is kind of what's going to grow the muscle. It's not necessarily. It's potentially the reps in reserve or total exertion that you have for that specific exercise.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think, I tend to agree. I think for me, when I'm thinking about exercise, it just comes down to, again, what your goals are going to be. If someone came to me that was looking to lose weight and they said, I'm going to start doing badminton or tennis or table tennis or squash or something like that, I'm like, that's great. I'm great. You're really happy you're moving more. That's fantastic. Let's keep doing that. But if we're really trying to lose weight, we've got to be doing, and you're limited on time and you want to be more efficient with how you're going to do it, you're just going to need to do things that are more efficient than something like, a table tennis or a squash. Because whilst you're still going to increase your heart rate at times, it's just not going to be consistent and efficient enough in comparison to other things that are going to provide you with a lot better energy expenditure.
I'm not sure if you're aware, Max, but I'm about 3'7" at the moment. So playing squash is actually a very difficult sport for me. My heart rate is busting. I'm breaking
Yeah.
absolute
No,
sweat.
squash,
But
yeah,
I
squash,
tend to
yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
If it's something of a situation of like, well, what's our best bang for the buck? What is like your quote unquote optimal? I think there are definitely better ways to address the situation. But of course, let's talk about sustainability. If I like squash,
Yeah.
and I can do squash 3, 4, 5 days a week, then why would I change that for switching to potentially something that's going to be less consistent, less reliable for that long term, which like, yeah, I might see better results in that short term, but that short term isn't exactly what my goals are personally. I'm more focused on how can I maintain some really good momentum and keep that going into that extended future.
Exactly. Yeah,
Or
adherence is
a
number one.
compromise between the two.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Adherence is number one. And especially if you're somewhat competitive, which if you're going to be playing those sports, it's probably likely, if you're inclined to play those sports in the first place, it's probably also likely you're the type of person that's going to be competitive in some form or another, which also means that if you can get someone at your level or that you're having good games with, the rallies are long, you're really busting your balls to get that next shot or whatever it is. And then you actually kind of really start to see some, if you're having long rallies in tennis and all that, boy, that's some really, that is intense exercise if you're doing that over and over and over again. And if you can get decently good at it too. So there's not just serve, miss, serve, miss, serve, miss.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think one of the things as well, which because we spoke about this in the first exercise, this is quite a decent tangent. First podcast, this is quite a decent tangent, but something that's we didn't touch on and something we didn't speak about. So it'd be good to clarify in podcast 11, 10 episodes later. We were speaking about, the whole idea and the whole theory of how people that are overweight and obese are only eating a small amount of calories every single day in a surplus, and the math checks out for that in the sense that that's essentially what's theorized and understood, in that they're not eating unbelievable surpluses every single day, and it's more just eating a small surplus every day, and that compounds to result in them gaining 10, 20, 30 kilos of body fat over the course of a lifetime. The counter argument is kind of like, well, all you need to do is reduce your calories a small amount and you will start to lose weight. One of the biggest things that would be put up against that argument, which I'd totally agree with, and I'm sure you would as well, is that your neat's pretty much going to follow. So it's not going to be as simple as, hey, take out 100 calories, take out 200 calories, and you'll start losing weight, because your neat's going to drop down with that. Would you agree as well, Matt?
Yeah, I think it'll drop down with it, but I think there's a few different variables that we don't often factor into account. So I think not many health professionals really acknowledge that fat mass itself is active and alive tissue. However, it's nowhere near as active as muscle tissue.
I think it's like
When
1/3.
Oh, is it about a third?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much the data supports.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it's approximately 1/3 of. So pretty sure a kilo of muscle is 9 calories. Every kilo you gain of muscle is an extra 9 calories. And I think every kilo of fat you gain is 3 calories for BMR.
Sure.
I'll quickly have a look at that
Expenditure
right
per
now.
day. Sure, that sounds good. But I think it's while you're doing that, I'll have a little discussion on that. There are major factors that play into if you are looking to lose weight. There's major factors that play that isn't just neat. So if we're losing total weight, we're losing total tissue. If that's fat tissue or if that's muscle tissue, there is going to be a reduction in your total metabolism, your total metabolic rate. Unfortunately, there's no special pill that I can give you that increases your metabolism. And even if I did give it to you, you wouldn't want it because it's just going to increase your rates of cancer. Sorry to break it to you. That's just how it works. We generally want a slower metabolism, the slower turnover of cells, the slower the kind of metabolic rate total generally kind of correlates with some more beneficial total health outcomes. Neat's going to follow. Don't know if it's going to follow in the same, let's say, the same velocity as your total reduction in calories. Say if I reduce my calories by 100, I don't know, I'm pretty sure that your neat's not going to reduce 100 to match it. I'd be very, very surprised if it does. But I think there's going to be a potential factor that's going to play into account in this situation.
I didn't hear anything you said. I'm just going to say, yes, very well said.
Okay.
Big agreeing. I do have it from an article called Self. I don't know who the fuck this is. Sure, they're an amazing person. I'm sure I love them a lot. It says for every pound, so I'm just going to double it. So for every kilo of muscle, it's around about 12 calories per day at rest. So I was close-ish. And I was right with it is 1/3. So it would be 4 calories for 1 kilo of fat. So yeah, that's essentially what it is. Meaning that, just like what I'm sure you were getting at just then, if I've got what you said, I'll be so happy. If you actually are obese or have, 10, 20, 30 kilos of body fat on you, that actually is a significant increase in BMR.
Your basal metabolic rate. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
you'll most likely plateau to a certain point. You won't
go. Even if your NEAT stays the same, which it won't.
Yes.
Yeah, because your NEAT's going to come down a lot. Because the NEAT is the most variable out of all the variables.
yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like where this podcast has turned into the shit on activity podcast, and I really want to emphasize that activity is extremely important.
No,
but
yeah.
The positive benefits we get from exercise and activity are almost two separate entities.
Mm-hmm.
Activity itself, whether it's physical and mental, we'll chat about both differences for the coming few minutes. Let's chat about physical activity first. I personally don't feel amazing. This is anecdotal in myself, my personal life. I don't feel amazing if all I'm doing is exercising for maybe an hour a day, pushing myself quite hard during that session, mostly resistance training. And then the rest of my day, I'm just sitting in this chair, typing away. My activity total levels throughout the day, not exactly super high. I'm not getting that sun exposure. I'm not pushing myself kind of gradually. There's kind of like a super high either in the morning or the night from the exercise, and then kind of a consistent drop or I guess plateau. I feel very much fatigued, and I'm kind of noticing that through life in general. If we don't exercise and then our activity is low, that's just a double whammy. We've really set ourselves up for a really tricky situation going further in life. And then our inability to maintain just even the base levels of muscle mass can be quite stark. You bind someone's leg for a week in, like, let's say a healthy individual. Myself, for example, I'm not very healthy. I just tend to claim that I am. I'm a big liar. You bind my leg in a cast for a week. You put me in a hospital bed. My leg that is bound and I'm like walking around with my other leg, that leg will lose like 1.4 kilos of muscle in just the span of a week. I hope I'm quoting that right, but it's astounding how much the reduction in activity, just baseline activity, just walking around, has as an impact on your ability to function and keep the baseline stuff going. And as we know, muscle mass is one of the best indicators for how long and how well you will live.
Yeah, and that's 100% exactly, you hit the nail on the head. Quickly, I'm just not going to disagree because this is all just opinion-based stuff. I'm actually the opposite. I actually feel really happy. If I've gone and trained in the morning, come home, and just spend the rest of the day at my desk, I feel so fulfilled, so happy, just everything is just amazing. I love my life so much if I've been able to have that day. And so yeah, I will just put it out there that I'm literally the opposite of you in that you feel you don't like that feeling. But for me, I feel really, really fulfilled and really, I've enjoyed that if I've had that opportunity to just sit at my desk the whole day and just get as much work done as I can.
That's cool, man. But you have it's a similar outlook, but it's quite different. Your sense of accomplishment from your work,
exactly,
is quite profound, and that tends to boost up your situation. But I will say, if I don't exercise and I'm inactive that entire day, I feel like just total like just trash. It's just, why did I even wake up kind of level energy? It's just absolutely shocking.
Because I don't feel trash, but I don't feel as good as if I had gone to the gym that day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So
definitely the activity thing's really important, and I think you really hit the nail on the head there. And we see that in that once you've gained a certain level of muscle mass, it's really easy to just hold on to that level of muscle mass. there's study after study about this. One recently just came out saying, I didn't actually read it. I'm going to, because I'm going to review it, saying that only one session you can do once you've gained a certain amount of muscle mass, only one session per week can maintain it. So if you didn't want to gain any more muscle anymore, you could literally go to the gym one day a week and you'd maintain that level of muscle mass. The really hard thing is gaining muscle mass. Maintaining it's relatively easy. And that's what you're getting at there, Matt, in that our body's happy to kind of maintain on the amount of muscle that we have if you're not doing everything in your power to not keep it. One of those things being literally binding your leg and putting it in a cast and never using it. Then it's going to be like, okay, well, let's get rid of this shit. Let's not, like, let's start decreasing muscle mass. So you're 100% right. The activity does play a important role in maintaining your muscle mass and those functions as well, which are probably overlooked by a lot of people.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that's a really interesting conversation I've had with a few people now. Is if I start working out, everything just crumbles. Like it'll go to trash. Like not necessarily. Like you can take a couple of days off and you'll probably just fine.
Weeks, yeah.
You won't be gaining at the same rate, but we need to establish if you're going through a tough time, you don't need to be gaining at the moment. It's more so about kind of what are your priorities? Is it more so taking care of your family situation or your mental health or smashing down that big work project or something like that? You don't need to be focusing on absolutely your training 100% of the time unless that is your goal. But of course, things can be bumpy through life. That's very well expected. Nothing's over smooth sailing. But I think it's comforting knowing that you only need to do the equivalent of one session a week to maintain all the amazing benefits that you've received up until that point. And that can go for, as far as I'm aware, up to quite advanced natural level bodybuilders.
So look, I haven't read the study. I have read other studies similar to it proposing that, you can do up to 1/3 or even 1/9. I read a study saying 1/9 of the volume. So that would be, if you were doing 9 sets of chest, you'd literally just do, so if you're doing like 20 sets of chest a week, you'd literally just do 2 to 3 sets of chest per week and you can maintain it. It's important to acknowledge these studies are obviously short-term studies. There's a lot of variables which haven't been taken into account. There's so many things where we could really, really push the boundaries and be like, okay, how questionable is this study overall? But the main thing being is that you obviously can do a lot less than what you were doing to maintain the amount of muscle. That's without a doubt true. Again, just from what you were saying there, I skimmed over a study. This was a long time ago. It's probably 4 or 5 years ago now. I skimmed over a study which just, what you were just talking about then, it just triggered me, was they compared one group of people just trained for, I think it was 16 weeks or so, just nonstop the whole time, 16 weeks. One group, I think, trained for 4 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 4 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 4 weeks on, 2 weeks off, something like that, a bunch of times. And they compared their muscle growth. And the 16 weeks was just very linear, just went up the whole time. And the 4 weeks on, 2 weeks off was like that, right? But they ended in the same spot. They started and ended in the same spot. The 4 weeks on just gained more muscle during the 4 weeks and then plateaued and then gained more muscle and then plateaued and then gained. So point being is that obviously I don't recommend that. I think that's silly and I don't think that's the best way to train. Point being, as what Matt was saying though, is that if you are having a difficult time, if there's something going on, you don't need to be scared to take a week off, take 2 weeks off, take a couple of days off, or have a rest day if you need it, or only train 3 days the next week or something like that. That's not something you need to be scared of if it's not something that's happening consistently. If it is a genuine once off, don't be scared.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more. In terms of activity, moving back to examples.
Sorry.
I just really like the way the conversation was flowing. I think we should bring it back a little bit. I think that was really cool. I quite like it. I had a tangent that I was going to go down, but I completely forgot to write it down. Jumping to examples of activity. So for myself, it's going to be things like motorbike riding, jet skiing, horse riding, diving, fishing, driving, fishing, things along those lines. So they're not necessarily pushing myself to exertion, not necessarily causing myself to like get a huff and puff going, but I'm still doing things. I'm kind of just working along and things similar to that.
That's really interesting because you can see in our marriage, you can see how much of a housewife I am in Matt and I's marriage, because while he's out doing all that, I'm at home. My things are more cooking, cleaning, making sure the kids are fed, all that. That's while Matt's out doing the skiing and the bike riding.
just an adventurous kind of guy. It's all networking. I claim it on tax write-offs.
Yeah. So
Moving to the mental health side of activity, in the same sense of you don't use it, you lose it. Mental health activity is just as important if we're not pushing ourselves to at least a kind of maintenance perspective, which I kind of think is activity in general, kind of just keeping everything afloat, going along. Things like having a game of chess, uni, school, socializing, tests, challenging yourself to a small degree in some manner, not an extensive degree. I think there's a very important factor that we miss out. And I believe that over time, and I don't have any evidence to support me on this one, but I believe over time, unless we're actively using our mind, our brain to some capacity, our function reduces over time at a quicker rate than it normally would. Of course, age is a factor. We can't deny age is a thing. We can definitely do things to work around that and then tailor our choices, our goals, and our plan moving forward to reach our goals. But I'm noticing that with a reduction in exercise, leading to a reduction in activity, leading to a reduction in socializing, mental activity, mental function and capacity, there seems to be almost like a compounding effect on the impact it has on our life, our longevity, and our health span. Just a quick ad break. We're now currently taking clients by the link in the description or via our website. Back to it.
Interesting. Yeah. Look, I literally know nothing about it. I have spent a total of 0 minutes thinking about mental activity and mental stimulation. So I really couldn't even comment, to be honest, on what I think about that all.
It's very much anecdotal. I'm not really speaking from reading any studies or anything along those lines. It's very much kind of viewing and acknowledging kind of patterns through life and patient progress. It's something that I'm trying to be a little bit more aware of, and kind of, I'm not entirely sure if it's a consequence of reduction in activity post retirement or if it's just a consequence of aging. I believe that if you go from working 7 days a week to retiring, there's absolutely going to be a reduction in function and capacity. Whether that has a mental toll as well, not entirely sure, but I believe there's definitely things that we can do to keep that going and keep ourselves, I guess, healthy and happy. Social life itself is one of the best indicators for health span and longevity itself. So if I was to rate the top three, I can't really put them in terms of a total rating, but definitely in the top three, we've got exercise, muscle mass, and your social life. Any thoughts on that one, Max?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think I agree, because someone like my dad, for example, my dad could get away with not exercising at all. Secondary to the fact that he has an unbelievable amount of muscle mass for someone his age. So he wouldn't even need exercise, because a lot of the reason why, like, just from a falls perspective and all that kind of thing, forget his heart is broken. From that like perspective, he wouldn't even need to, because he's got so much muscle mass on him that all those things are not going to be an issue. Like if he only focused on doing cardiovascular stuff, he loves going to the gym and all that now. But if you only focus on doing cardiovascular stuff, the whole muscle mass thing, because he's already checked that box, he doesn't need to worry about it, kind of thing, at all. Which I think is interesting. So it's the only reason why we would care about the exercise and resistance training would be if they didn't have enough muscle. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Or the predicted amount was going to be not enough in the future.
Yeah. I think that's probably more important, is the amount we have now sufficient?
Yeah.
And if something happens, are we comfortable with the amount that we would lose from having a hospital admission or something along those lines?
Yeah, exactly,
I think it's incredibly important to acknowledge that the higher your muscle mass, as far as I'm aware, the literature supports is kind of like clear cut. The higher your muscle mass, the less time you spend in hospital. From recovery, the less time you spend recovering, the less time you spend as an inpatient. It just sounds like you have a better time and an easier time recovering from whatever instance if you have a higher level of muscle mass in the first place.
Interesting. Yeah. Because my dad could literally lose 10 kilos of muscle and they'd still say, like, yeah, you'll be all right.
Shoot right, mate.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, look, I really can't comment on anything. So it's hard to have a back and forth convo because I don't know anything about the
Oh,
mental
but
side of stuff.
you think I know things? I just kind of talk, and then sometimes people tell me I'm wrong. Most people are too polite to disagree with me, so it's just me floating my own boat most of the time. I'm sure someone smart in the comments will be like, "No, you're wrong about that statistics X Y Z." We go,
Yeah.
I mean, sure. I mean, everyone makes up their own statistics. I personally have never said a statistic that I've actually remembered. That's also a lie. But.
Let's get into NEAT. So what are going to be some things that are going to increase your NEAT, decrease your NEAT? Because we're saying it's very extremely variable. It changes on a regular basis, and it's not something you can also control. So it's subconscious. What are going to be some things where they feel like their NEAT has decreased a lot? What sort of questions you'd be asking to investigate to see whether it has decreased or not? Really.
Yeah. I would be initially starting the discussion of, okay, well, what are you doing differently if you're thinking that your NEAT has decreased? Have you noticed that you're doing things less? Are you less
Nah,
energetic
I'm
throughout the
not.
day? You're
Nah.
not energetic. Oh, okay, interesting.
Oh,
Interesting.
look, no, like
And
I feel the same. I just, still going to work, still doing all the things I need to do, catch up with friends and all that. Yeah.
uh-huh. And do you have any body composition goals at the moment?
Yeah. Look, I was doing great. So I'm down 3 kilos, and I just all I did was just cut out dessert. That's all I did, and it just
Mhm.
worked so well. And I've just plateaued, unfortunately. I lost a good amount of weight that first week, got about a kilo, and then for the next I think 6 or 7 weeks, lost about 2 kilos after that. So I'm down 3 kilos, but yeah, for this last 2 or 3 weeks, it just hasn't the weight hasn't budged.
And are you doing anything else apart from cutting out dessert? Nothing else has changed?
Nah, everything else is the same. Because look, I'm pretty steady with everything. So have the same. I love my Weet-Bix in the morning. Have a good sanger for lunch, and dinner's usually the meat and 3 veg kind of thing. So I'm pretty similar. But yeah, just I don't know what's going on. Like I think it must have damaged my metabolism, or I skipped breakfast a couple mornings ago, so I think my metabolism's broken after that.
Yeah. I tend to agree. The metabolism usually gets shotgunned if you skip a meal. But uh, in terms of your energy levels throughout the day, how are they?
Look, yeah, not too bad, not too bad. I don't really, yeah, yeah.
You would
It's
say
up
they're
and
the
down.
same as before versus after?
Look, yeah, it's hard to tell. Probably maybe a bit less. Yeah, a bit less. Touch.
Bit less.
Yeah.
I would lean towards saying that bit less is the variability in NEAT, and then the lack of introduction of, I wouldn't say lack of, but the I don't know how to reword this, but the lack of introduction of an exercise or additional activity throughout the day has potentially led to some total mass definitely loss. Of course, you've noticed you lost 3 kilos, but there's potentially a loss of the muscle mass as well, which is, let's say, kilogram for kilogram more energy consumptive over the entire day. So there's a few different factors going into that scenario. I don't think you've lost weight too quickly, which is a good thing. It sounds like you've lost weight relatively gradually over a 7 week period, which I'm not ringing too many alarm bells from my end. But it's potentially a thing where we're looking at, okay, well, what else are we doing throughout the day? Can we reassess the situation? Is it actually that we've lost 3 kilos? Has anything changed with our water intake? Have we gone to the bathroom more? Any change in patterns? Medication changes? There's a few different factors that I would like to investigate further to see if there are any other potential factors playing into the scenario, or if it's literally just that we need to adjust and have a play around with what we're consuming, how much we're consuming, the timing of that consumption as well. Especially if we're missing out on potentially a protein source in the morning from your breakfast, I think there's potentially a really great area of improvement that we can work towards.
Interesting. I was just thinking while you were saying that, because I'm going to do a post on how when you're at a given body fat percentage, it's really difficult to change it because of the fact that body fat is so calorie dense. Like 7,700 calories for 1 kilo of fat is a lot. It's very calorie dense. So to be in a 7,700 calorie deficit, it's a lot. It takes a long time. It's a lot. It's a lot of work, and it's only 1 kilo. It's like holy shit. That's difficult. So it's hard to change whatever state you're in. Same as if you're naturally lean, trying to gain body fat, or it's hard. It's a lot. Like you got to be in a 7,700 calorie surplus. That's a difficult thing to do. And I think the really difficult thing is when we look at all these different areas, there's so many, everything's working against you. Literally. It's like if you're trying to if you're trying to lose weight, literally everything's working against you. The thermic effect of food is less because you're eating less food, right? So thermic effect of food is just a percentage. So the way it works, just really quickly, is it's the amount of energy that your body burns to break down the food you're eating. If you're eating less food, your body requires less energy to break down the food you're eating. So the thermic effect of food is less, right? NEAT is less. The reason being is because you're going to be, potentially more fatigued, less energetic. There could be so many different things. Your body can actually essentially your body's going to be able to determine that you're eating less food and you're in like a deficit rather than a surplus or at maintenance, and it's just going to turn the dial down on how much NEAT you're going to be doing subconsciously throughout the course of the day. Exercise probably will stay pretty consistent. And the BMR, just like you were saying before, again, another thing that's working against you. If you're not actively trying to keep all the muscle on your frame, you're going to inevitably lose muscle, which is going to decrease your BMR. So it's like everything is going against you in that instance. And yeah, for me, it's just interesting. I haven't really thought about it like that before, and that you've got so many things working counter to what you want.
There's a lot of factors at play. I think being aware of them provides us power over the situation and the ability to control those factors. If we're blissfully ignorant and just thinking that, oh, I didn't eat breakfast so my metabolism's cooked now, then okay, potentially that is the biggest hindrance in your ability to achieve your goals, because we haven't understand the fundamentals. We don't really understand what's going on in your own body. Why are we not achieving our goals? Are we blaming it on, oh, I changed in my juice cleanse, I've changed my pineapple to guava and now I can't achieve my goals anymore? It's okay. I think that we're focusing on potentially the wrong thing in this scenario.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Anyways, that's just something I was just thinking about. And the opposite for if you're trying to gain weight as well. Your NEAT's going to go up because you're in a surplus now, so your body's most likely going to increase the NEAT. The TEF goes up. Your BMR is going to be going up because you're going to be gaining body fat and muscle mass. So the BMR, like I said, everything just works against you there's things in play, the way our bodies work, there's things in play that result in you making it difficult to change whatever phase you're in or whatever state you're in, body fat percentage wise.
There's always difficulties to adjust with change. Our bodies like to be in a state of homeostasis, keeping the same. It doesn't really like variables too much, from what I'm aware anyways. So it's going to actively work against some level of adjustment to a certain extent. I think there's definitely a proclivity towards certain areas, but there's always factors that we need to be aware of, and there's always plans that we can put in place to achieve those goals and make them just that little bit more easier and more realistic to get there.
Yeah, 100%. So look, for me, from a NEAT perspective, it's extremely variable. And the reason why I really harp on it is because I've seen it firsthand, and I've seen how much it can really fuck with you mentally as well. Because for me, because I know rock solid 100% that metabolism, you can't break your metabolism, you can't slow your metabolism, you can't fast it, you can't make it faster, you can't damage it or any bullshit that goes on. I don't get scared. As someone who tracked his calories for a really long time, for 5 years, I didn't get scared when I noticed significant drops in my calorie intake. So for example, when I'd go from massing where it'd be 5,000 plus calories, sometimes even close to 6,000 calories, and then I'd go to dieting and I'm, having less than 4,000, less than 3,000, around about 3,000 calories a day, 2,200 around about. That doesn't make sense if you don't really know much about nutrition and the way total daily energy expenditure works. Because if you think, well, I was only in a 200 to 300 calorie surplus when I was at 5,000, let's just say 5,500. It was usually around about that, sometimes a bit higher. So technically my maintenance was at 2,500, sorry, 5,200, let's say, and then I was eating at 5,500, which means that you'd think if you were, as a layman, you think, okay, well, if he needs to be in a 500 calorie deficit, he's only going to need to go to 4,700 calories, right? But no, I needed to go all the way down to like 3.2 or 3.5, around about that. Point being is the whole variance, that whole 1,200 calorie variance was literally NEAT.
I
And
remember we had a really in-depth discussion
yeah,
with that, Max, and I couldn't come up with an additional argument that would explain that amount of variance. It
yeah,
was just,
it
it didn't
has to
really
be
make too
neat.
much sense to me.
It has to be neat, exactly. And so that's the reason why I harp on about it, is because I think that the reason why people get so confused about the whole metabolism thing is because that happens to them, and they go, "Holy shit, I'm eating so much less than what I should be eating to only lose a little bit of weight," and they don't realize what's going on. So that's why I really like to harp on about it. You really should be seeing that if you're in a surplus, your needs most likely going to be, not for everyone. There's always going to be people that are anomalies. Some people are actually in a surplus, Matt, and their need will drop because they might get lethargic and they might get, like lazier. But most people, if they're eating in a surplus, the need's going to naturally increase, and if they're eating a deficit, the need's going to naturally decrease from there.
Yep.
And that's just what happens for most people most of the time. So yeah, it usually will follow. So like what would happen with me with my NEAT is that I'd finish the diet at 3,200 calories or so, and I'm ready to start massing again. And I knew over experience over the course of the next few weeks or so, due to doing this a bunch of times, is that I would start at 3,500 calories. My NEAT would come up a little bit. It would meet me at 3,500. Then I'd be at maintenance again. I'd go up to 3,800. The NEAT would meet me again, and it would literally just be like step ladders until I got to that like 5.5K mark, where it would stop. It would stop meeting me stop meeting me to the party. Like what the expression?
Yeah, I think that works quite well.
So yeah. Anyway, hopefully that makes sense. Everything I just said just then.
Yeah, absolutely. That was really good, really good. I think I've got one last comment before I think we finish up.
So
on the topic of damaged metabolism, and I think this can be a whole entire
100%.
company worth of podcasts. I agree. Nothing that you specifically do is probably going to damage your metabolism. I'd be very surprised that it does. However, if you go through periods of yo-yo dieting, hey, I'm just a normal person. Oh, I do this, I do that. Looking to lose a bit of weight. Going to try keto for a bit. You've reduced your total calories by 50%. You lose a lot of muscle mass. You now go back, finish that keto diet. Cool, everything's fine. Straight back to smashing donuts. You've now in the same position you were before. The only thing that's changed is you've lost muscle. As we discussed earlier, that muscle is extremely active tissue. You potentially now put yourself in a worse position and are going to gain more weight than you were before, especially if you haven't been doing increased activity or exercise in that scenario. So in a sense, you could, I guess, quote unquote, damage your metabolism by doing that, but it's not going to actually damage it in the way that we think about it. It's something that's very predictable.
The key distinction between the words here is that it won't slow the metabolism; it will just lower the metabolism to a lower rate. So the metabolism is still as fast. Look, we're going to get it. I'm going to get into this really probably with my YouTube videos that are coming out. It's going to be shortly on the horizon. Probably be releasing early 2025, I'd say. But yeah, I'll be really going into the two things we're distinguishing with the metabolism stuff is that the two questions I'm going to be exploring is metabolism different between people? So is 1 kilo of muscle on me, does that take up the same amount of calories per day as 1 kilo of muscle on Matt or any other given person? The other question being is that can 1 kilo of muscle sometimes take more calories or less calories? Depending on given states. There are two questions that we're talking about. And we're definitely answering the second question with no, it cannot.
Max, that's extremely interesting. I think if you've made it, the listener have made it to the end of this episode, you're an absolute legend. But you should also definitely follow and subscribe because it's obviously interesting to you. So you can be notified when that video comes out and we have that further discussion because I think 100%. That'd be such an interesting and thought-provoking area to discuss.
100%. Yeah. Without a doubt. Thank you for listening to podcast number 11.
Thanks, dudes. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Thank you so much for listening to the Real Health and Nutrition podcast. The sponsor of today's show is you. You support the show by listening and using our services of dietitian consultations and performance coaching. We offer in-depth one-on-one consultations to help you achieve your health and performance goals. Any random bloke online can give you a generic meal plan where we here at R.E.A.L work collaboratively with you to reach your goals, making you feel heard and including you in your journey's planning. Our service offers tailored advice and can accompany meal plans and/or realistic nutrition strategies, which can be booked via our website www.recoveryexerciseandlifestyle.com. That's www.recoveryexerciseandlifestyle.com. Just a quick disclaimer: this podcast is for education, information, and general entertainment purposes only, and does not constitute the practice of medical nutrition therapy or healthcare of any discipline. The content discussed in this podcast is not intended to be a substitute of professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please review our terms of use via our website. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.